Eatings. Something completely different from my usual videos today, and I've enlisted my girlfriend for this one. We're going to show you how to make what I call Inception Pie. Fruit pies in a fruit cake in a pie. Here's what you'll need. 300 grams of sugar, 300 grams of flour, 300 grams of margarine. We usually use Stork, but there wasn't any in the shop. 750 grams of dried mixed fruit, a box of mince pies, whatever brand is on offer, 5 eggs, 5 tea bags, 1 block of ready to roll pastry, unless you want to mix your own, some golden syrup, some milk, some caster sugar, allspice, ground nutmeg, mixed spice, ground cinnamon, ground cloves, mixing bowl, rolling pin, wooden spoon, weighing scales, containers to help weigh things out, a large cake tin, a dinner plate, colander or sieve, some baking paper, a chopping board, some foil, and of course an oven tray, large saucepan and a cooker. First of all, long before you start making this, put the mince pies in the freezer. The theory behind this is that they've already been baked, so by freezing them first, you give them the rest of the cake a chance to bake without over baking the pies lurking inside, as they'll be thawing out instead. Next up, again this bit takes a while, is the fruit. 700 to 750 grams of dried mixed fruit in a pan with enough water to cover it all. Add your 5 tea bags and bring the lot to the boil. As soon as it starts boiling, switch it off, make sure everything's under water and cover it. This will sit for a while, so go do something else. Go to work, go visit your family you haven't seen for weeks. Just do something. By the time you come back to it, the fruit will have soaked up a lot of the tea, so it's time to drain them off in a colander or a big sieve. In this case they were left for 8 hours, and the 750 grams of fruit now weighs 1.1 kilos. Now's as good a time as any to prepare the cake tin. You'll want 1 disc of baking paper the same size as the base of the tin, and 1 a bit bigger to go on top, and 2 side pieces to go around, obviously, around the sides. Grease the inside of the cake tin with some of the spread. You can use an offcut of the baking paper to do this. Line the sides of the paper, overlapping at the bottom, push the smaller round piece into place, and then grease the surface of this paper with some more spread. Right, preheat the oven to 150 degrees C and let's mix some cake. To start with, the 300 grams of spread and 300 grams of sugar go in the bowl. Using a wooden spoon, crush and mix this together. You can squash it up against the sides until all the sugar is mixed in with the spread. You may find it easier to use a second wooden spoon as well. Don't use a food blender, it's too dense a mix and you'll just let the magic smoke out of the motor, then you'll have to put it back in the cupboard under the sink and blame whoever uses it next. Eggs time, 5 of them. If you've got a spare Tupperware container or dish, it's worth cracking them into one of these, as it's easier to pick bits of shell out of a small tub than out of the mixing bowl. Once you've got your eggs out of the shells, dump them in the bowl and mix them in. Next, 300 grams of flour plus the spices. A bit of each, but not too much. Use the cap to measure out, as it's easier to tip excess back in from a cap than it is from a bowl of flour. Once they're in with the flour, tip the whole lot in the bowl and keep on stirring. Now add a great big spoonful of golden syrup. Now add all the fruit and mix it in. Again, 2 spoons makes very light work of this. Once that's all mixed together, put some of the mix in the cake tin. You'll want enough to cover the base. Now get those mince pies out of the freezer and place 3 of them face down in the mix. If the tin's very small, just use 2 instead of 3. Make sure they don't touch the sides. You want them to be fully surrounded by cake mix. Add some more mix to pretty much cover the pies, and then add another 2 or 3 face up in the gaps between the first ones. Again, make sure they don't touch the sides. Now pour in the rest of the mix, which will cover them completely. Once that's done, pop it in the oven, remember at 150 degrees C, and cook for 4.5 hours. If you've got an oven timer that will switch the oven off at the end of the cooking time, use it. Once it's finished cooking, let it cool down in the oven. We left it cooking and cooling overnight. Grab a baking tray, line it with foil, grease it with spread and put it to one side. You can now take the cake from the oven, out of its tin and out of its paper. A dinner plate can be useful at this point, as you can just upend the cake onto the plate. Now preheat the oven, but this time to 180 degrees C. Mix a little bit of caster sugar with a splash of milk and use this to moisten the side and the top of the cake. If you've got a pastry brush, use this. This will help the pastry to stick to the sides when it's in the oven. Now it's time for that pastry. If mixing your own, you may want to mix a bit of sugar into it to sweeten it. If not, then just put some flour on your chopping board, put about a third of the pastry to one side and roll out the rest. You can use the cake tin as a guide. You'll want this piece of pastry to be as wide as the base plus enough to go up the sides. Put the pastry over the cake, drape it down, pat it into the sides and then cut the excess off the bottom. The excess now gets rolled out to make another piece. Put this on the top and then crimp, fork, roll or whatever you want to do to the edges of the pastry to join the edges. Chuck a bit more milk on to glaze it if you like, then pop the whole thing onto the tray and back in the oven. In this example we gave it 20 minutes in the oven, spun the tray round and then give it another 20 minutes. And you're done. Out of the oven, let it cool down. An hour or so later and it's ready. Pie, inside a cake, inside a pie. Happy eating!